The Cleveland Torso Murders, A Descent into Darkness. In the grimy, smoke-choked heart of Depression-era Cleveland, where the Cuyahoga River twisted through a city battered by economic despair, a shadow moved unnoticed. It was the 1930s, a time when hope was a scarce commodity, and the streets of Kingsbury Run, a desolate, weed-strewn gully on the city's east side, were home to the forgotten. Hobos, drifters, prostitutes, and the destitute huddled in makeshift shantytowns, their lives precarious, their existence barely acknowledged. Amid this bleak tableau, a predator emerged, one whose savagery would carve a bloody legend into Cleveland's history. The Cleveland Torso Murderer, known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, was an unidentified phantom whose gruesome acts of dismemberment would haunt the city from 1935 to 1938. No name, no face, just a trail of severed limbs and headless corpses that whispered of a mind consumed by sadistic compulsion. Cleveland in the 1930s was a city on its knees. The Great Depression had gutted its industrial soul, leaving steel mills silent and families starving. Kingsbury Run, once a thriving artery of commerce, had become a squalid refuge for those society had discarded. The area east of the Run, known as the Roaring Third or Hobo Jungle, was a festering underworld of bars, gambling dens, and brothels, where desperation hung in the air like the stench of rotting garbage. It was here, among the cardboard shacks and tar paper hovels, that the Mad Butcher hunted. His victims were the invisible, transients and outcasts whose disappearances went unnoticed until their mutilated remains surfaced, scattered like grotesque offerings in the muddy creek bed or along the shores of Lake Erie. The killer's anonymity only deepened the terror, as if the city itself had birthed a monster from its own decay. Who was this faceless predator? No one knew, and that was the horror of it. The Mad Butcher was a specter, slipping through the shadows of a city too broken to notice. Police speculated he was someone with intimate knowledge of anatomy, a doctor, perhaps, or a butcher, given the surgical precision of his cuts. The dismemberments were not random. They were deliberate, methodical, almost ritualistic. Heads were severed at the third intervertebral disc, limbs cleaved with a blade that left clean, practiced edges. Some bodies were drained of blood, their skin treated with a chemical that turned it red and leathery, as if the killer were preserving his work for some twisted gallery. The coroner, Samuel Gerber, described the killer as a demented doctor, or someone driven by a fury of a long drinking bout or derangement following the use of drugs. But beneath the clinical analysis lay a darker truth. The Mad Butcher's motive seemed rooted in sadism, a perverse pleasure in dismantling the human form, reducing lives to scattered fragments. What drove such a mind? Was it rage against the destitute, a godlike need to dominate the powerless, or something even more incomprehensible? The killer's choice of victims, men and women from society's fringes, suggested a predator who thrived on their vulnerability. The decapitations, often performed while the victims were still alive, spoke of a cruelty that went beyond murder. In many cases, the cause of death was the dismemberment itself, the victim's final moments filled with unimaginable agony. The killer's taunts, like the mocking letter sent to Eliot Ness in December 1938, claiming he had moved to California and buried a woman's head in Los Angeles, hinted at a mind that reveled in its own elusiveness. The letter, signed as a D.C., or Doctor of Chiropractic, was a chilling jest. Investigators found only animal bones at the supposed burial site, yet it underscored the killer's arrogance, his need to toy with those who hunted him. The Mad Butcher's victims were more than just bodies. They were stories erased. Only 3 were ever identified. Edward Andersey, a 29-year-old hospital orderly with a troubled past; Florence Polillo, a part-time sex worker known in the Roaring Third; and possibly Rose Wallace, identified tentatively through dental records. The rest, 6 John Does and 4 Jane Does, remained nameless, their identities swallowed by the city's indifference. The killer's choice of Kingsbury Run as his dumping ground was no accident. This was a place where the living were already ghosts, where a severed torso could lie unnoticed until a stray dog or a vagrant stumbled upon it. The area's desolation amplified the horror, as if the land itself were complicit in the killer's work. The city's residents lived in a state of creeping dread. Newspapers like the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the Cleveland News screamed headlines about the torso murders, each new discovery fueling panic. The Roaring Third became a place of whispered warnings, where no one walked alone after dark. The killer's ability to strike without leaving a trace turned him into a myth, a boogeyman who could be anyone, or no one. Was he a respected surgeon, hiding behind a veneer of civility? A deranged vagrant blending into the shantytowns? Or something worse, something that defied reason? The uncertainty gnawed at Cleveland's soul, turning neighbors into suspects and shadows into threats. At the center of this nightmare stood Elliot Ness, the famed prohibition agent who had brought down Al Capone. By 1935, Ness was Cleveland's public safety director, tasked with cleaning up a corrupt police force and restoring order to a city on the brink. Young, charismatic, and relentless, Ness was a symbol of hope, a man who seemed capable of anything. But the Mad Butcher was no bootlegger or gangster. He was a phantom who left no fingerprints, no witnesses, only pieces of his victims. Ness's involvement would become both a crusade and a curse, as the killer's elusiveness chipped away at his reputation. The torso murders would test Ness like no other case, exposing the limits of his brilliance and the depths of human depravity. The Mad Butcher's reign was a descent into a kind of primal terror, where the line between man and monster blurred. His motives, though never fully understood, seemed to pulse with a sadistic hunger, a need to dominate, to destroy, to reduce his victims to nothing. Each dismembered body was a message, a grotesque challenge to a city already broken by poverty and despair. As the murders unfolded, Cleveland would become a battleground, not just between law and lawlessness, but between humanity and something far darker. The Mad Butcher was out there, watching, waiting, and no one, not even Elliot Ness, could predict where he would strike next. In the festering underbelly of Cleveland's Kingsbury Run, where the air reeked of coal smoke and despair, the first grim discovery came on September 23, 1935, like a scream in the night. Two boys, scavenging for scrap along the weed-choked slopes of Jackass Hill, stumbled upon a sight that would haunt them forever. Two headless male torsos, drained of blood, their limbs severed with surgical precision. The older victim, later identified as Edward Andersey, a 29-year-old drifter with a rap sheet for petty crimes, lay beside an unidentified man, their bodies grotesquely arranged, as if posed for some macabre display. The cuts were clean, the work of a blade wielded with chilling expertise. The heads, found nearby, stared blankly into the void, their expressions frozen in death's final terror. Cleveland had seen violence before, but this was something else, a violation so perverse it seemed to mock the very idea of humanity. The city reeled as word spread through the Roaring Third, where dive bars buzzed with whispered fears and shantytowns bristled with unease. The Cleveland Plain Dealer splashed lurid headlines across its front page. Headless bodies found in Kingsbury Run. The news struck like a match in a tinderbox, igniting panic among the city's downtrodden. Kingsbury Run, already a no-man's land of hobos and hustlers, became a place of dread, its shadows pregnant with menace. Every rustle in the underbrush, every flicker of movement in the fog, felt like the Mad Butcher's gaze. The killer's anonymity fed the terror. He could be anyone. The quiet man nursing a beer in a saloon, the vagrant curled up in a cardboard shack, or even a respectable citizen hiding behind a mask of civility. The discoveries came relentlessly, each more horrific than the last. In January 1936, a woman named Florence Polillo, known for her hard life in the Roaring Third's brothels, was found in pieces behind a butcher shop on East 20th Street. Her body, dismembered with the same eerie precision, was stuffed into burlap sacks. Her head never recovered. The coroner noted the chemical burns on her skin, as if the killer had treated her remains with a preservative, turning her into a grotesque artifact. The city's pulse quickened with each new find. In June 1936, a boy fishing along the Cuyahoga River spotted a human head wrapped in trousers, bobbing in the oily current. Days later, a torso washed up near the West 3rd Street Bridge, its limbs scattered like driftwood. The victim, another John Doe, bore the Mad Butcher's signature: clean cuts, bloodless flesh, and a head severed while the heart still beat. The terror reached a fever pitch in September 1936 when a hobo tripped over a torso in a Kingsbury Run Creek bed, the body so fresh it glistened in the morning dew. The head was missing, but the coroner's report sent chills through the police department. The victim had been alive during the dismemberment, his screams likely swallowed by the desolate gully. By now, the body count was climbing, 5 confirmed victims, possibly more, and the city was unraveling. Mothers forbade their children from playing near the run. Barflies swapped wild theories about a demon surgeon or a cannibal doctor stalking the streets. The Cleveland News ran a cartoon of a headless specter labeled the Mad Butcher, looming over the city like a nightmare made flesh. The Roaring Third's denizens, already hardened by poverty, began carrying knives, their eyes darting to every stranger. The killer's audacity grew with each murder, as if he were taunting the city. In July 1937, a young girl gathering firewood near Lake Erie's shore found a torso wrapped in a blanket, its arms and legs hacked off with a butcher's skill. The head, discovered days later in a nearby sewer, bore traces of lime, as if the killer had toyed with preserving it before discarding his trophy. The victim, possibly Rose Wallace, a mother from the slums, was identified only through tentative dental records, her life as fleeting as the city's memory of her. By early 1938, the discoveries became a grim rhythm. A woman's leg found in a dump, a man's torso floating in the Cuyahoga, a Jane Doe's remains scattered in a field near East 9th Street. Each scene was a tableau of horror, the bodies arranged with a perverse artistry that suggested the killer relished his work. The community's fear was palpable, a living thing that pulsed through Cleveland's streets. In the Roaring Third, prostitutes refused clients after dark, and hobos abandoned their shanties, fleeing to safer cities. Church congregations swelled as preachers railed against the devil among us, while parents clutched their children closer, whispering of a monster who stole heads. The police, under pressure from a hysterical public, patrolled Kingsbury Run with flashlights and shotguns, but the killer left no footprints, no witnesses, only the echo of his blade. The city's newspapers fueled the frenzy, printing gruesome details alongside pleas for vigilance. "Who will be next?" screamed one headline, capturing the collective dread that hung over Cleveland like a storm cloud. Yet amid the horror, a strange fascination took hold. The Mad Butcher's elusiveness made him a dark legend, a phantom who seemed to dance just beyond reach. Amateur sleuths pored over crime scene photos leaked to the press, searching for patterns in the cuts or clues in the victims' lives. Barroom debates raged over whether the killer was a surgeon, a slaughterhouse worker, or something worse, a maniac with a god complex. The mystery was intoxicating, drawing people into its orbit even as it repelled them. Each new body was a puzzle piece, a tantalizing hint at an answer that never came. The killer's ability to strike in plain sight, in a city crawling with cops, only heightened the thrill. He was a shadow who owned the night, and Cleveland was his stage. The climax came in August 1938, when the killer's boldness reached a sickening peak. 2 bodies, a man and a woman, were found in a dump near East 9th Street, their torsos stacked like cordwood, their heads and limbs missing. The scene was a grotesque spectacle, staged in broad daylight as if to mock the city's helplessness. Crowds gathered at the site, their gasps mingling with the stench of decay. The police cordoned off the area, but the damage was done. The Mad Butcher had turned Cleveland's fear into a public performance. For a moment, it seemed the city might break under the weight of its own terror, its people paralyzed by the thought that the killer was watching, waiting, choosing his next victim. But then a shift. The discovery slowed, the bodies stopped appearing. The police, led by the relentless Elliot Ness, doubled their patrols, combing Kingsbury Run's every ditch and alley. Ness, whose name carried the weight of his Chicago triumphs, threw himself into the case, his jaw set against the rising tide of panic. The city's fear began to harden into resolve, a collective refusal to let the Mad Butcher define them. Community watch groups formed, their lanterns piercing the fog of Kingsbury Run. The newspapers, once sensationalist, began printing tips on self-defense, urging citizens to reclaim their streets. The terror, though still raw, gave way to a gritty determination. Cleveland would not surrender to its monster. Yet the Mad Butcher remained a specter, his shadow lingering in every dark corner. The case was far from solved, and the city knew it. Each quiet week without a new body felt like a held breath, a fragile pause before the next horror. The people of Cleveland, gripped by both dread and defiance, waited for the killer's next move, unaware that the worst was yet to come. In the shadowed heart of Cleveland, 1936, Elliot Ness stood as a beacon of resolve against the tide of terror that the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run had unleashed. The city's public safety director, still riding the fame of his Chicago victories over Al Capone, was no stranger to battling monsters. But this was no gangster he could corner in a speakeasy. This was a specter, a killer who left only mutilated corpses and mocking silence. Ness, with his sharp jaw and steely eyes, threw himself into the chase, determined to drag the Mad Butcher from the shadows. Yet, as the bodies piled up in Kingsbury Run's desolate gullies, the killer's elusiveness turned the pursuit into a maddening dance, each step pulling Cleveland deeper into a nightmare where answers seemed just out of reach. The police pursuit began in earnest after the second torso was found in September 1935, the headless remains of Edward Andersey and an unidentified man sprawled on Jackass Hill. Ness, newly appointed to clean up Cleveland's corrupt police force, saw the case as a crucible. He assembled a task force of his best men, seasoned detectives like Peter Marilow and Martin Zalewski, who knew the city's underbelly like their own scars. They combed Kingsbury Run, their flashlights slicing through the fog, searching for any trace of the killer. A footprint, a bloodied rag, a witness who saw too much. But the Mad Butcher was a ghost. No fingerprints marked the bodies. No murder weapon lay discarded in the weeds. The surgical precision of the cuts, clean, deliberate, almost artistic, pointed to someone with medical or butchering expertise. But Cleveland's hospitals and slaughterhouses yielded no suspects. The killer seemed to know the police's every move, striking when they were stretched thinnest, then vanishing into the city's maze of alleys and shanties. The investigation's intensity surged with each new body. By mid-1936, after Florence Polillo's dismembered remains were found stuffed in sacks behind a butcher shop, Ness ordered round-the-clock patrols in the Roaring Third. Detectives haunted the dive bars and brothels, grilling prostitutes and hobos who might have seen something in the run's moonless nights. The community buzzed with rumors. A deranged surgeon from Cleveland's elite West Side, a vagrant with a hidden blade, or even a cop gone rogue. Ness himself interrogated doctors and medical students, chasing leads about anyone with anatomical knowledge. One theory pointed to a local butcher with a history of violence, but his alibi held. Another lead suggested a former morgue worker, but he vanished before police could question him. Each dead and tightened the noose of frustration around Ness's neck, his boyish confidence eroding under the weight of a case that defied logic. The killer's taunts fueled the chase's fevered pitch. In December 1936, a letter arrived at police headquarters, written in a mocking scrawl. It claimed the Mad Butcher had killed again, leaving a head buried near Lake Erie. Detectives scoured the shore, finding nothing but driftwood and despair. The letter, signed with a cryptic DC, hinted at a chiropractor or doctor, but searches of Cleveland's medical community turned up empty. The killer's arrogance was palpable. He was toying with Ness, daring him to catch up. By 1937, the body count climbed to 8, each corpse a grotesque puzzle piece. A man's torso floated in the Cuyahoga River, its head severed while the heart still pumped. A woman's leg, chemically treated to a leathery red, surfaced in a dump near East 9th Street. The killer's methods grew bolder, his dumping grounds more public, as if he craved the city's horrified gaze. Ness, desperate for a break, turned to unorthodox tactics. He recruited informants from the Roaring Third's underbelly, petty thieves and sex workers who knew the run's secrets. One tip led to a raid on a hobo camp, where police found a blood-stained knife, but tests proved it was animal blood. Another lead pointed to a shadowy figure seen near the run the night a torso was found, described as tall, gaunt, and carrying a satchel. Detectives chased the phantom through Cleveland's slums, only to lose him in the fog. The city's newspapers, smelling blood, turned on Ness, questioning his competence. "Ness fumbles as Butcher strikes again," screamed the Cleveland News, the headline a knife in his pride. Yet Ness pressed on, his obsession with the case consuming him. He slept in his office, poring over coroner reports, his desk littered with photos of severed limbs and eyeless heads. The tension reached a boiling point in August 1938, when the Mad Butcher staged his most audacious act yet. 2 bodies, a man and a woman, were found in a dump near East 9th Street, their torsos stacked like trophies, their heads and limbs gone. The scene, discovered in broad daylight by a passerby, was a deliberate provocation, a middle finger to Ness and his task force. Crowds swarmed the site, their whispers turning to shouts as police struggled to hold them back. The city teetered on the edge of chaos, fear giving way to fury. Ness, his face gaunt from sleepless nights, took the stage at a public meeting, vowing to catch the killer. "He's human, not a ghost," Ness declared, his voice steady but his eyes betraying doubt. Behind closed doors, he confided to Marillo, "He's laughing at us, Pete. He's always one step ahead." The climax came in a daring move that would define Ness's legacy in the case. On August 18, 1938, Ness ordered a raid on Kingsbury-run shantytowns, believing the killer might be hiding among the hobos. At midnight, his men descended with torches and shotguns, tearing down shacks and rounding up dozens of vagrants. The raid was a spectacle, flames lighting up the night as the run's makeshift homes burned. 2 men were arrested, Frank Dolezal, a bricklayer with a history of drunken brawls, and a mysterious drifter known only as John Doe. Dolezal, under brutal interrogation, confessed to killing Florence Polillo, but his story unraveled, details didn't match, and he later recanted, claiming coercion. Days later, Dolezal was found dead in his cell, his wrist slashed in an alleged suicide that reeked of foul play. The drifter, meanwhile, slipped through police custody, vanishing like smoke. The raid, meant to be Ness's triumph, became his albatross, criticized as a desperate act that destroyed lives without catching the killer. The resolution, if it could be called that, was a bitter pill. The shantytown raid marked the last major discovery of bodies, as if the Mad Butcher had retreated into the shadows, spooked by Ness's aggression or simply sated. Ness, battered by public scorn, doubled down on patrols, flooding Kingsbury Run with officers. The city, exhausted by fear, began to rebuild its nerve. Vigilante groups patrolled the run, their lanterns a defiant stand against the darkness. The newspapers shifted focus, praising Ness's resolve even as they mourned the lack of answers. The Mad Butcher's trail grew cold, his elusiveness a final taunt. Ness, haunted by the case, carried the weight of its failure, his dreams plagued by visions of headless corpses and a faceless killer who slipped through his fingers. Yet Cleveland's fascination endured. The Mad Butcher became a legend, his mystery a dark allure that drew amateur sleuths and thrill-seekers to Kingsbury Run, searching for clues in the weeds. The case, unresolved, pulsed with a twisted glamour, a puzzle that promised answers just beyond the next shadow. For Ness, the hunt was far from over. He knew the killer was still out there, watching, waiting, his blade gleaming in the fog. In the summer of 1938, Cleveland was a city on the edge, its streets humming with a restless dread that clung like damp fog. The Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run had carved his name into the city's soul, leaving a trail of dismembered bodies that mocked every effort to unmask him. Elliot Ness, the golden boy of law enforcement, stood at the center of the storm, his reputation fraying as the killer danced just beyond his grasp. The pursuit had become a fevered obsession, a chess game with a phantom who played by no rules. As the body count stalled after the shocking discovery of 2 stacked torsos in August 1938, the city held its breath, waiting for the Mad Butcher's next move, or for Ness to finally close the trap. But the truth, as it so often does, slipped through the cracks, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt Cleveland for decades. The chase for the Mad Butcher had reached a fever pitch after the Shantytown raid, Ness's desperate gamble to flush the killer from Kingsbury Run's shadows. The raid's failure, marked by the suspicious death of suspect Frank Dolezal and the escape of a mysterious drifter, only deepened the city's unease. Ness, his face etched with sleepless nights, refused to relent. He pored over case files in his dimly lit office, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the weight of failure. Detectives Peter Marillo and Martin Zalewski, his trusted lieutenants, scoured the roaring third, interrogating every vagrant, butcher, and doctor who crossed their path. The police had a profile, a man with surgical skill, a knowledge of anatomy, and a sadistic streak that reveled in dismemberment. But Cleveland was a city of thousands, and the killer could be anyone, a respected surgeon, a slaughterhouse worker, or a ghost who lived in the run's cardboard hovels. The tension built like a storm cloud in late 1938, when a new lead electrified the investigation. A tip from a barmaid in the Roaring Third pointed to a man named Francis Sweeney, a disgraced doctor with a history of alcoholism and mental instability. Sweeney, a hulking figure with a disarming smile, had once worked in Cleveland's hospitals, his hands trained in the art of surgery. Rumors swirled that he frequented Kingsbury Run, blending into the shantytowns with ease. Ness, sensing a breakthrough, ordered a covert investigation. Detectives trailed Sweeney through the city's underbelly, watching as he slipped into dive bars and lingered near the run's desolate edges. His erratic behavior, bursts of charm followed by dark, brooding silences, set pulses racing. Could this be the Mad Butcher, hiding behind a doctor's mask? The investigation reached a heart-pounding climax when Ness brought Sweeney in for questioning in May 1938. The interrogation, held in a smoky room at the Hotel Cleveland, was a battle of wills. Ness, his voice low and commanding, pressed Sweeney on his whereabouts during the murders. Sweeney's responses were slippery, laced with cryptic laughter that sent chills down the spines of seasoned detectives. He admitted to wandering Kingsbury Run but denied any killings, his eyes glinting with what seemed like amusement. Ness, desperate for a confession, subjected Sweeney to a grueling polygraph test, an unproven technology at the time. The results were tantalizingly inconclusive, showing spikes of stress, but no definitive guilt. Sweeney's smirk as he left the room was a taunt, a dare to prove what everyone felt in their bones. This man knew more than he let on. The city buzzed with anticipation. Newspapers, sensing a scoop, printed veiled hints about a prime suspect, fueling wild speculation. The Roaring Third's denizens whispered of a doctor who prowled their streets, his satchel heavy with blades. Ness, under pressure to deliver, pushed his team to the brink, staking out Sweeney's haunts and digging into his past. They uncovered a chilling detail. Sweeney's cousin, a prominent politician, had shielded him from prior arrests, raising questions of a cover-up. The plot thickened when a letter, eerily similar to the Mad Butcher's earlier taunts, arrived at Ness's office in December 1938, postmarked from Los Angeles. It claimed the killer had fled west, burying a woman's head in the California sand. Ness dispatched detectives to investigate, only to find animal bones, a cruel jest that echoed Sweeney's mocking demeanor. The drama peaked in early 1939 when Ness, convinced Sweeney was his man, orchestrated a secret operation. He had Sweeney committed to a mental institution under an alias, hoping confinement would break him. Detectives watched from the shadows, waiting for a slip, a confession, anything to seal the case. Sweeney, however, remained a cipher, his behavior oscillating between lucid charm and manic rants. He spoke of cutting through the fog and freeing souls, phrases that sent shivers through those who heard them. Yet no hard evidence tied him to the murders, no bloodied knives, no hidden trophies, only a gut-wrenching suspicion that he was the monster. After weeks of observation, Sweeney was released, his cousin's influence whispering through the corridors of power. Ness, furious but outmaneuvered, watched his best lead slip away, the killer's shadow lengthening over Cleveland. The resolution, if it could be called that, was a jagged wound. The murders stopped after 1938, as if the Mad Butcher had vanished into the ether, or been quietly contained. Sweeney drifted into obscurity, dying in a veterans' hospital in 1964, his secrets buried with him. Ness, his reputation bruised, never publicly named Sweeney as the killer, perhaps fearing backlash or lacking the evidence to convict. The case remained unsolved, its files gathering dust in Cleveland's police archives. The city, exhausted by years of terror, began to heal, its people reclaiming Kingsbury Run's scarred landscape. Vigilante patrols faded, and the Roaring Third's bars hummed with new stories, the Mad Butcher fading into legend. Yet the lack of closure was a splinter in Cleveland's heart, a mystery that refused to die. The open-ended nature of the case only deepened its allure. Was Francis Sweeney the Mad Butcher, his madness cloaked by privilege? Or was the killer still out there, lurking in another city, his blade poised for the next strike? Whispers persisted of bodies found years later, in Chicago, Los Angeles, even Youngstown, bearing the Mad Butcher's signature cuts. Some swore they saw a gaunt figure in Kingsbury Run long after 1938, his satchel swinging in the moonlight. Ness himself, haunted by the case, confided to friends that he felt the killer's presence, a shadow that followed him to his dying day. Cleveland's residents, drawn to the mystery's dark glamour, spun theories in barrooms and church basements, each tale more tantalizing than the last. The Mad Butcher story doesn't end here. It lingers, a puzzle with missing pieces that beckons the curious to dig deeper. What secrets did Sweeney carry to his grave? Did Ness come closer to the truth than history records? The answers, if they exist, lie buried in the shadows of Kingsbury Run, waiting for someone bold enough to uncover them. To unravel the next chapter of this chilling saga, stay tuned to our channel, where the Mad Butcher's mystery continues to unfold, pulling you deeper into Cleveland's darkest nightmare.